So I think now we're going to probably go to the general Q&A. So if anybody in the audience has questions for Dan, start dropping them in the chat or the questions tab down below. I'll start with the first one from Chris. He asks, for acquisitions right now during COVID, the T12 rent roll from the property still supports a high valuation that looks similar to 2019, but there's the giant question mark of what about the future of collections? How are you underwriting and actually making offers that take this into account? How does an investor feel safe with your purchase price in this current environment?
Well, there's a lot of things that we have to look at as far as the historicals as well, right? If his property is newer, it's a little bit harder to kind of see how a particular market performed, like say in the last recession. And I think given the last 6 months, if you will, of what has transpired with COVID-19, I'm not going to say I have a perfect answer for this, but we have to basically, when we're taking into account the underwriting, expand certain things, right? So we just saw the worst unemployment in the history of the United States, right? And obviously there was a lot of things happening from a stimulus standpoint that definitely helped. But overall, if you look at it, it wasn't like you're going to have your property go from 95% occupancy down to 50%. I mean, there had to be something even worse than COVID-19 that would cause that to happen. And so as long as you're looking at the data and looking at it from a standpoint of looking at the sensitivities, looking at what happens if you pulled certain levers, decreasing your occupancy throughout a period of time, and then decreasing your rent growth, and kind of seeing what happens to the returns based on those numbers, as well as what happens with the expansion of the cap rates, looking at that standpoint. And then also what happens if it takes you longer to renovate the units, if you're trying to renovate units. Like if you're trying to project 24 months, what happens if you do it to 48 months? What's actually going to happen to that property when it does that? And then also one of the big important things is break-even analysis, right? Like at what point are we going to have to dip into reserves or dip into a potential capital call for investors? And so that's where you have to be very cognizant. Most of our acquisitions in the Class A space are going to be between about 55 to 60% in break-even. When you're looking at a Class B plus, it's going to be a little bit higher than that. It'll be probably about 60, 65%. If you're going into some of the B minus or C class assets, it's going to be a little higher than that because there's going to be a lot more deferred maintenance and things like that, and there's going to be a lot of unknowns that actually occur. And one of the other things that we do is we make sure that we have plenty in operating reserves. We want to make sure that we can be well capitalized from the very beginning, so we can ride out any storm. So we have to treat it like anything else, right? Storms come for a season and they leave, right? Just like this COVID-19 has come for a season. Has it completely gone? No, it hasn't. But we're seeing some improvements on the numbers. And will it get worse again? I don't know, right? And I think that anybody who invests at this time should not invest, or at any time. I don't want to say just right now, but nobody should invest in multifamily if you cannot live on and survive with losing all of your investment, right? Even though the likelihood of that is very, very, very nil, it's very small. I still make sure my investors understand that you don't want to get into these types of investments unless you can risk losing it all, right? And I don't know anybody, and maybe you guys know some people, but I don't know anybody that has actually invested in multifamily and lost all of their investment. I know some people that have lost some of their investment, right? But not all of their investment. So but there is that potential. And I never want an investor to invest in a deal if it's their last $50,000, right? I don't want that pressure on me, and I certainly don't want that investor having that pressure, because they're also going to be reaching out to me all the time, asking me questions, and be very worried about the investment along the process. So unless the investors have that extra cash to invest, and that's why you want to diversify. So if you have $500,000 to invest, don't put it all in one basket. If you lost all of that, and it would hurt you, right? Put 50,000 in this deal, 100,000 in this one, 200 over here. Diversify those funds up a little bit so you have some diversification and risk, and not just an asset class, but also diversification in markets, right? So don't always put all your eggs in one basket, like all of it in Charlotte or all of it in Raleigh. You got to be able to diversify that so you can reduce that risk across the board and have a good diversity.
Awesome. So Marco asked, can you talk about the profile of your LPs that you're raising from? Doctor,
Sure.
Lawyer types, family office.
So we do not accept, I don't say we don't accept, but we are not interested at this time in accepting any institutional money. So we have a very small family office that has invested with us. You don't know who they are, but they invested like 50 grand. So it wasn't a significant amount of money that they invested. So, but we don't accept right now a lot of or any institutional money. So all of our money is coming from private high net worth individuals that are primarily accredited, that have the ability to invest in these assets, right? For the most part, we've been doing 506B as in Bravos, but we're actually moving forward into more 506C and Charlie, so that we can expand the ability to be able to market some of those assets and be able to bring in we only can bring in accredited investors, for those of you who are familiar with those rules. But most of our investors are private individuals. So they are business owners, entrepreneurs that have money to invest. They are doctors, lawyers, attorneys, accountants. We have people in the military they're high paid people in the military that invest with us. So it runs across the gamut of where people actually invest. And we did a study, a demographic study, to kind of see where most of our money was coming from. And I don't think I can share my screen, can I?
I don't think so. But
okay. Well, anyway, so we basically broke it down, and actually in our investor newsletter, we did some demographic studies that showed where all the money was coming from, like by state. Like each state, we would shade it a different color based on how much money was brought in from that particular state, and so it's all across the United States. I think we've collected investor money from about 43 different states right now, and so. That to me, I think that's pretty cool, right? To be able to say that you pretty much have covered almost the entire United States. I still want to get that last little bit left, right, of the states to kind of fill it up. But the investors are all over across the board, and I will tell you that our average investment did go down on that last deal. So that, of course, tells you about investor sentiment as well. So we track that very closely. So most of our prior investments has been around $95,000 to $100,000 as the average investment. On the last deal, it was closer to $75,000. So it did drop a little bit, and it's because at that time, people might not have wanted to put in a full, 100, 150, 200,000, or we might have seen that in the past. They might have still wanted to come in, but maybe not put in as much in that particular property because of COVID-19.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Chris asks, is there a way that you could find an article on or some resources that you have on the split tier system that you do for your investors?
Yes, I actually wrote an article on that. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. I think I posted it on our website. There's a knowledge center on our passiveinvesting.com. Here, let me see if this is it. Nope, that was a waterfall structure. I did an article on equity waterfall structures and hurdles. Let me see if it actually has been posted. You said the two-tiered structure, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so here is actually an article on that where it kind of breaks down the capital stack, where I kind of talk about that inside of that. But if you want to shoot me an email at dan@passiveinvesting.com, I'm more than happy to share with you that article if you'd like to see that. Here's a link to an article that we did on our website about understanding the capital stack, and it kind of breaks down where you are in the capital stack with those two-tiered structures as well. So.
And then Marco asks, can you talk about the economics of your deals, fees, press, promotes, etc.? If there's some stuff you can't talk about, no big deal. But that was a question,
sure,
Marco.
Sure. So in general, I will discuss this. So we have three primary fees that we charge. So we have the acquisition fee, which is typically 2%. We have sometimes it's 3%, depending on the size of the deal, but usually it's 2%. We have a disposition fee of 2%. The difference between our disposition fee and a lot of other groups is that our disposition fee is performance-based, meaning that we don't take the disposition fee until we actually hit a certain IRR hurdle. And so if we hit that hurdle on exit, then the disposition fee kicks in. And then we also have the asset management fee, which is typically about 2% as well. And then as far as how it actually splits and stuff, usually we do on the Class B shares, or if it's a straight, split, a single tier LP structure, we do a straight 70-30 split. And then we'll also have a secondary hurdle at usually between about 13 to 15% IRR, depending on the deal, and where it actually splits to 50-50.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Yeah, if anybody else has some questions, we got a few more minutes here. Feel free to drop them in there. Yeah, do you have any other words of advice for any? I think we got a lot of syndicators on here. Any words of advice for how to move forward for those people?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So for those of you who are new to this space and maybe haven't done your first deal, I always encourage investors to start off just like I did, where you're passively investing first, get your feet wet in a couple of deals. For me, it helped me to be able to structure our own investor relations piece and investor management to understand kind of what I like, and then from what other operators are doing and what I don't like. And I still do it now. So I'm actually currently invested in 26 different passive multifamily investments with 9 different operators. So I'm still keeping my feet wet and keeping my hands, if you will, inside of different people's operations to kind of see how are they doing things. Is there something that maybe I want to incorporate? Or maybe they're doing something that I don't like and that I want to make sure we don't do, right? So it kind of helps me kind of sharpen that. And plus it helps me diversify my portfolio a little bit too. And then after you do that, a couple LP investments, being able to kind of find another group that you can trust and rely on to kind of build your own credibility, to be able to JV and partner with them first before you start to go out with your own deal. And then after that, be able to go on and actually find your own deals. And then number one thing I would say is you got to find a mentor, right? I have a mentor from the very beginning. I know you guys have had mentors in the past. I know most people that do things on a very high level have mentors, right? I mean, you think about some of the top paid athletes in the world, they all have multiple coaches and mentors, right? That they're paying on a regular basis to help them. And I think as to help to if you're going to be able to sleep well at night, put your head on a pillow at night and take money from investors, that's what you have to do, is be able to find somebody that's done things like this already, and you can reduce that learning curve and be able to make yourself sleep at night. Because that's one of the questions I get quite often is how can you accept, in the last 12 months, not including this first deal, but the last 12 months you've raised over like $40 million for these deals. How can you sleep well at night knowing you have all this money of other people's money and you're entrusted with it? And I'm like, well, it's because we only go after good quality, solid assets that I want to put my own money in, and so that I can sleep well at night for my own money. And if I can sleep well with my own money, I'm not worried about everybody else's money because I know I'm going to be taking care of them as well. And then for those of you who have maybe put together a few deals and you're kind of trying to find that next deal, is keep underwriting, right? Keep underwriting, keep modeling your deals, keep working with, building relationships with brokers, and keep finding investors so that you can continue to grow. Because even though right now might not be the right opportunity for you to get into a deal, or you're not going to get a deal awarded to you, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you're going to get one, but you don't want to be lagging behind by just doing nothing. So keep on to be able to find those next deals and find the next investors so that you can continue to grow your syndication business and truly treat it as a business, right? Don't just treat it as a side hobby or a side hustle or anything like that. This needs to be something that you treat as a business, and that it's very serious, because you're dealing with people's hard-earned money, and you don't want to be considered a Bernie Madoff because you just ran off or just lost a lot of people's money because you were just treating it as like a flippant hobby or something like that. So that would be my 2 biggest things for both the newbie syndicator, but also for somebody who maybe have been in it for quite some time.
So Chris had a good question in terms of, meeting folks and raising capital and all that. Is there something that you've done that has been a surprise to you, whether that's, hanging out Ferrari dealerships or, in-person meetups, or, I know you have lots of groups on Meetup, and you have, your podcast, and, you have webinars, I think weekly or bi-weekly. Is there anything that's been kind of a surprise to you that you're like, man, I'm going to double down on this. This is great.
I love this topic. So how much time do I have?
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes, but yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll make this brief. Let me tell you, this is one of a common question that I get. And most people, when I answer this, don't like my answer originally in the beginning, because it's not a very specific answer, but it's true. Okay. So about probably 6 or 7 years ago, my wife and I went on vacation. We went on vacation to Sanibel Island. Actually, we only had like 2 children at the time. Our second child was just born, and we left him with the grandparents. And we went down to Sanibel Island, Florida, for a 10-day vacation down there. If you've never been down there, it is phenomenal. It's right outside of Fort Myers. It's just beautiful. Sanibel, Captiva Island, that area. And every morning we would wake up and we'd have a cup of coffee. And we do that here at home too, and kind of, talk to each other and spend time with each other. And one of the things we did there was the same thing. We would sit on the back porch because our porch, our back deck was actually you could literally jump into the Gulf of Mexico from our porch, literally. And so there was a dock right in front of it and stuff like that. So you have to make sure you hit the dock. No, I didn't attempt the jump. I'm just saying for visualization purposes, that's what it was like. But every morning we would wake up, we would see there off the dock, there'd be a fisherman that would come out and throw a rod out, and he'd throw his rod out there, just let it sit out there for a few minutes, pull it back in, go to another part of the deck, try to pull it back in. He didn't catch anything. And he did that like 3 or 4 days in a row. Then all of a sudden on like the 5th day, across the corner coming down the sidewalk was this guy with a wheelbarrow full of like the whole gear, like everything. And he had like 7 or 8 fishing rods, all the bait and the tackle and all the gear and everything. And he was just like, you could tell he was walking, like going to town. He knew what he was getting ready to get into. And right behind him was his wife with a book, right? And they're walking down, and they plop there's a bench right onto the left of the deck. She sat on the bench. He parked the wheelbarrow behind the bench, and he just started one by one. He didn't go on the deck. Okay. So he went on the side of the bank and actually started putting out the fishing rods. And he had those little posts you put in the ground so you can put the fishing rod in there and then go put the next fishing rod up and things like that. And he started putting up, 6, 7, 8, all 8 of them were up at that point. And all of a sudden, by the time he got the 8th one done, guess what happened? The first one started to bite, right? Or one of the first ones. I don't know if it was exactly the first one. One of the first ones started to bite. So he ran over to that first one, pulled the fishing rod out, started pulling that fish in, and then another one started to bite. He'd go over there and get that one. And then all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 of them are biting at the same time. He recruits his wife, right? So his wife puts the book down. She's over there, and they're both feverishly pulling this fish out. And I was sitting back on that deck going, this is a perfect example of how marketing should work. And at that moment is when I started to change things in my clinics, where I started to do what's called a multimodal approach to marketing. Because the other guy that was coming there 3 or 4 days in a row, he was insane, right? Because doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different results, called insanity, right? Where the other guy was thinking outside the box, right? I don't know if he actually saw the other guy on the deck, or maybe he had done it before, but he wasn't going to go on the deck, right? He kind of, I guess, knew that everybody else goes on the deck and they weren't going to find any success. So he's going to go over here and he's going to do something different. Instead of just putting 1 rod out, he put 8 of them out, right? So he had 8 more opportunities to be able to find people. And maybe one of those rods didn't catch a thing, right? But, a lot of them did. And so that I'm bringing up that story to kind of drive home a point in the fact that there is not one thing ever that I do that produces more leads than everything else, right? My goal in marketing is to create a consistent multimodal approach to marketing so I don't have these big, huge sine wave curves in the number of leads that are coming in, right? I want to have this consistency across the board. What we sometimes tend to do is we tend to go, what's that magic bullet or that silver bullet that we can actually just do this one thing and it brings in 30 leads one month, right? Well, guess what? Next month, it might only bring 1 or 0. And so that's when you start to have those dips and ebbs and flows in your business. And it's not just with multifamily, it's across the gamut in all small businesses. When you start to use marketing, you need to do a multimodal approach, because once you start to have this multimodal approach working, guess what happens? You have an exponential increase, because now people are going to see you and hear about you from multiple points and fronts. Yesterday, on Tuesdays, is usually when I do my investor calls, and I'm booked up for the next 3 weeks. And yesterday when I was doing those calls, several of the guys were like, listen, I know you guys. I've heard about you everywhere. You got a good reputation. I'm like, I don't even know the guy, right? But he's obviously talked to other people. He's heard about us from multiple points. And those people will say, like, I've been following you for a couple of years, right? So it's never just one thing that's going to bring you the most people. It's the consistency in what you do. But when you first get started, you a lot of times have to start with one piece, right? So you need to start with something that you like to do so you can make sure that it's consistent. So if you like video like this, go do a video YouTube channel or something like that. Do Facebook Lives, do whatever. If you like more like writing, well, start a blog, write articles, produce content. If you like to more talk, but you don't think you look pretty or good or whatever, just do podcasts, right? So whatever you think is the thing that you will do consistently, that's what you should do. So, and then once you start the one thing, you can continue to add on more and more things over time to be able to have an exponential increase in effect on the amount of leads that are actually coming in, and you will start to see that exponential increase. But one of the biggest things that I miss and I see on this is the lack of consistency. Somebody starts a podcast, they do it for 5 or 6 months. You've seen it, Dustin. I know somebody does it for 5 or 6 months, and all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, what's going on with the podcast?" "Oh, I'm not doing it anymore." Or they'll usually say, "Oh, I've just paused it for now, but I'll start it up in the future." And it's you have to be consistent with whatever you do.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Yeah, so it's 1:00. Really appreciate you spending this hour with us. Again, for everybody that's joined, if you click the offers tab, we've got all of Dan's contact information, and you can get in touch with him through there. But Dan, if you have any final words, if you want to direct people to your website or send you email or any maybe resource that you have for people, yeah, feel free to let them know.
Sure. So I'll mention 2 things. So you can obviously go to our website. I mentioned it a few times, passiveinvesting.com. If you're interested in joining us, one of our future properties, you can certainly do that. There's a button on that page, top right-hand corner, that says join the Passive Investor Club. You can certainly join us there. We'll have a one-on-one phone call with you, discuss your investment goals, and see if you're the right fit for our group, and vice versa. If you're wanting more information just about training on multifamily, I do a weekly webinar. It's a free weekly webinar on multifamily. I'm actually doing one tomorrow, actually. If you go to multifamilyinvestornation.com, you can type in your email there to be notified of some of our future webinars. And I'd love to have you join us over there and be connected with you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that's it. We're at our time limit. So yeah, appreciate everyone. Thank you, Dan, so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And yeah, look forward to seeing you in person. So
yeah,
at some point in the future.
Looking forward to it. Yep.
Cool. All right. See you, everyone. Take care.
See you guys.